Welcome to the Museum in Arlington, Virginia, for this week's Close-Up at the Museum discussion of whistleblowing. Hi, I'm John Molesky of the Close-Up Foundation. In a moment, you'll hear from college students who join us from various points around the country. They're here under the auspices of the Washington Center, and they're taking part in internships around the city. And you'll meet some of them, hear what they're doing in just a moment. First, I'd like to introduce you to our panel. Joining us is Stephen Kohn. Stephen is chairman of the board for the National Whistleblower Center and the author of 4 books on the subject, including the first legal treatise ever written on whistleblower law. Here's the book, Whistleblower Law, A Guide to Legal Protection for Corporate Employees. Co-authored this with some people, one of them another of our guests. But also joining us is Bunnatine Greenhouse. Bunny Greenhouse is a former chief civilian contracting officer for the United States Army Corps of Engineers. She objected to no-bid contracts for reconstruction in Iraq that were awarded to a Halliburton subsidiary. She was demoted from her post, and her bosses say for substandard job performance, her supporters say for retaliation in response to her objections over the contracts. Also with us, as I mentioned, co-author of the book, Michael Kohn. Michael is brother to Stephen and is general counsel at the National Whistleblower Law Center. He is representing Ms. Greenhouse. He is her attorney. Good morning and welcome to the discussion.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me start, Stephen, with you with just some definition. Talk to us about the term whistleblower and what is the specific definition in this context.
Well, a whistleblower is someone who exposes waste, fraud, corruption, environmental violations, some form of wrongdoing, and suffers retaliation. Nobody likes the messenger. No one likes to hear the bad news. And throughout history, whistleblowers have been subject to retaliation. The Whistleblower Center exists to provide support for the whistleblower, be they Democratic, Republican, doesn't matter who they blow the whistle on or what. It's a nonpartisan organization that supports whistleblowers. You can learn more about it at whistleblowers.org. That's our webpage, and it lists the clients and the cases and the services we have.
Is there I don't want to oversimplify this, but is there a cultural barrier to whistleblowing in that everybody is told by their parents not to be a snitch, not to tell on the other kid, all that type of thing, and you grow up with that as seen as some sort of dishonorable activity?
Well, there's no doubt many of our clients say, I'm not a whistleblower. They hate the term, they hate the connotations, and they will go down for their whole life saying they're not a whistleblower. But I think one of the most important things to get over that stigma, when Time magazine put 3 whistleblowers on the cover, when the American people learned that whistleblowers could protect billions of dollars in their investment, whistleblowers could expose faults in the war on terror that protect everybody, whistleblowers could save billions and have saved billions and billions in taxpayer dollars for fraudulent contracting, then I think the connotation changes. And part of what we want to do is to make it positive. I mean, when someone has the courage to really live the First Amendment, why was the First Amendment even passed? When you go down, you look at history, it was passed primarily to support whistleblowers. They didn't call them that, but it was passed because people understood that someone in a position to know of wrongdoing needs protection when they step forward and help everybody else.
I think there's also a cultural aspect in our society where we have pushed moral and ethical values and come from a country where we have civic education in school, where we stood up against what we called a tyrant back then, and people stood up and said, wrote on a Declaration of Independence, there is the first act of whistleblowing in the country, and that resonates. And so when whistleblowers come in, where they say, I'm not a whistleblower, they're not identifying themselves as a whistleblower, they're really identifying themselves as a patriot. And that's what we really see coming into our office, our patriots who have raised serious concerns and are now in the middle of a battle with very little support and being shot out from all directions.
How did you get involved in this aspect of the law? Certainly you didn't go after the big corporate dollars.
No. When I graduated college, I decided that I wanted to actually do a study, which was what would our society allow you to do without ending up dead or in jail or something or another. And I looked around and said, well, I'll become a lawyer, and then I will take on the most powerful institutions I can figure out how to take on without a profit motive involved, and let's see what type of change our society will allow me to accomplish, or well, I end up dead in the gutter or disbarred or something. And so it was, I ended up in whistleblower protection because that's where people had the most dynamic information to give forward, and you could really do the most for somebody. And that's where we ended up in law. I didn't end up disbarred or in the gutter, but did have a death threat every once in a while. But
who led the way, Stephen? Who was the original rebel in the family here?
Well, it's funny because I was the first one to get involved in Whistleblower, but Mike landed me the job. He knew somebody, made a couple of phone calls. But it's the same thing. I mean, for me, it was public interest law, using the law to serve the public interest. That's what I wanted to do when I went to law school. That's what I wanted to do when I went to college. And whistleblowing is just an amazing area because you get to work with people like Bunny. Everyone says a lawyer, you know, you're duty-bound to represent your client, be they a murderer, be they a perjurer, a polluter, but you, the lawyer, pick your clients. That's your ethical decision. And to have people like Bunny as your client is the greatest honor, because then you can use your skills and your intellectual power and your education to help people like her. That's the choice. And that's what really, it's the difference. I think back to some of my clients who did incredible things at the EPA or the FBI or in corporate America. And I say, God, these people are heroes, and I got to be part of that process. I mean, it's just, you know, that's the reward.
Bunny, at what stage in this story did the term whistleblower occur to you? Is that what you might be becoming?
Well, I didn't like the term either, you know, as whistleblower. But remember one thing, I am first Bunnatine Greenhouse, and I am a civil servant. A civil servant who came into government taking an oath of office, saying that with procurement particularly, I had to ensure, you know, that the procurement process was at the highest levels of integrity, was at its fairest, and that had preferential treatment toward none. So for 8 years at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I have been doing just that job. You know, regardless of what the consequences, making sure that my leadership knew exactly what were the risks and what were the circumstances that we were getting into and what things were going against compliance to the law. And
So
making sure those things were eradicated.
Your job was direct response to those criticisms over multi-$100 toilet seats that we heard about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's when the first of contracting and acquisition reform started. And we brought about the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act, you know, which started changing things and professionalizing that contracting workforce. So, as I said, I didn't like whistleblowing because I was simply doing my job.
What, in doing your job, what was it specifically that you objected to in this circumstance?
Well, at the beginning of the Iraq War, we were into, the culture is that whenever we're in a contingency or in an emergency, there needs to be things that are done quickly and that they must be done by sole source. I'm saying that is not necessarily true, because we government are in charge, you know, of the rules. And we set the rules, we set all the rules of engagement that we do. We can have a competition within hours. We can have a competition within days. It doesn't have to take the 30 days or the 45 days that is usual practice. But we are in charge, you know, of that. I objected to, first of all, I saw some things that were conflicts of interest as to the reasons why we were going sole source, you know, with the Halliburton Company. I saw that if we were going out with a contract that was supposed to be a bridge to get the war started, it should not have been for 5 years. It should not have been for a set 2 years base and 3-year options. When we were sitting back in Washington, and it's simply by the stroke of a pen, we could have extended that contract if things were, the insurgents were as terrible as they may have expected them to be. And so I objected to that. I objected to a 5-year contract when it came to me to sign the sole source justification for that.
And who initially did you take your objection to?
Initially, of course, to my the management at the Corps of Engineers, to the head of the contracting activity, at that time was General Flowers. I told him why I wrote the reservation that I did, because I had to protect the integrity of that process.
And what was the response that you received from your supervisors?
At first, I thought that he understood. But obviously now in the process of being demoted, he didn't understand.
So how did it go public? How did this become an issue that went beyond the
Well,
office?
I was working, any civil servant is first going to work in your chain of command to try to get issues resolved. And I did that. If you would see my, the long list of emails, you know, going back and forth, trying to get everybody to understand what I, as the principal assistant responsible for contracting, you know, had to ensure of. I did that. And then not until just before the election, you know, did I get a letter from General Strock at the time, who is now the chief of engineers and the commander of the engineers, telling me that I was going to be reduced in grade and removed from my position. Now, you take it, I just briefed him on October 1st of that year, just before the election. He gave me a letter dated October 5th. So he had not been in command from the time I got the letter or taken my briefing as my entrance to him to understand the problems and the challenges that I needed him to work with me. And only those number of days did he give me a letter to say I was going to be removed.
But General Strock was also the architect of the Iraq contracting activity beforehand.
Absolutely.
And Bunny had already told the Secretary of Defense's office about the problems. It was known throughout the Army what was going on.
And had you ever received any negative feedback in job evaluations prior to this demotion?
I had, my initial job evaluations were level 1s. That's the top. I have had one level 2. What they did was, I had, when General Flowers came in, I got a level 1. The next year, I had a level 1 when the commander left and retired, and they changed it to a level 2. And so the next year, I went from a level 2 to a level 5, and a level 5 is the lowest. As if I sat there and I did nothing. And if you were to look at the track record of all that I did and all they complained about because I was writing on documents, you know, in order to make sure that our people in the field were educated around what it meant by fairness, integrity, compliance, and all those things that we must lift up in government.
And did you approach the Whistleblower Center, or were you approached by them?
Well, I was trying to work in-house. Michael Kohn was my lawyer, you know, under the EEO process, the Equal Employment Opportunity process. And when the Corps of Engineers saw that they were losing the EEO process, they then just decided, well, we can just do it. And we'll just do it and give her a letter and say that she's removed. Because within the SES, the Senior Executive Service, there is a little loophole that they have there, saying that if a senior executive gets 2 performance rating of failing within 2 unsuccessful, I shouldn't say failing, unsuccessful in 3 years, that they can be removed or have adverse things done to them. They are the people who wanted to make sure that Bunnatine Greenhouse was removed. They had felt that I had more power than the chief of engineers in the business of contracting, and it wasn't about power. It was about doing the right things for the right reason, making sure that the playing field was level for all of the groups that wanted to participate in our process, whether it was small businesses or women-owned businesses or whatever the case, and large businesses.
Mike, if you talk about... Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. The Whistleblower Center doesn't reach out to whistleblowers. They essentially come to our office or seek assistance. And we do have a nationwide attorney referral service. We're only able to help a small handful of people who come in.
But you wait for them to ask.
Generally, yeah, and they're coming in almost about 1,000 requests per year. And we have lawyers in almost every...
And of those 1,000, how many can you handle?
We can maybe do 10 or 15 at the most. We have lawyers and members in every state of the country. So the vast majority will just get referred out to a lawyer who's also an expert in whistleblower law or has some background and experience in it. And we'll try to pick up the cases that we can. It's a resource issue. But Bunny's case was just spectacular because, you know, she was in a position to know. And in fact, something else to keep in mind in terms of how people first learned about it, they didn't like her writing on the contracts and writing protests.
Handwritten notes on the
Yeah.
notice.
And the reason for that is another law known as the Freedom of Information Act, which is a critical public interest law, which we use all the time, it allows people to get it. So groups out there actually, through Freedom of Information Act, had obtained the contracting documents and learned about Bunny before she even stepped forward.
Right.
Just
Can't
by
you
reading
just
the
wipe that
document.
stuff out and claim national security? Is it
They
possible
did?
to do?
Well, they do exemptions all the time, but in that one they did.
Mike, I want you, before we go to questions, I want you to comment on where the litigation is now. What are the,
Sure.
Where are we in this?
Right now, we're still in the EEO process. We've been fighting it out to say that internally there should be the ability for her to bring her discrimination claims of race and sex and whistleblower all in one proceeding and go forward. The Army is refusing to do that. We're sort of at a stalemate there. At some point, we will probably move into federal court. There's a resource issue, and it's very time-consuming and costly to do this type of litigation. So we're trying to get our ducks in a row. We need as much support as we can, public support. Whistleblower cases are often won by the public coming forward and supporting individuals more than anything else. It's that, it's that other arm of government, essentially, which is the media. And someone like Bunnatine Greenhouse, who has devoted her life to serving this country, deserves our support. And she's getting it. There are people who are writing in all the time who really appreciate what she's done. She's given up her career just because she saw what was going on was wrong, and it's been a lifelong struggle for her. When she first got in, she objected to the bundling of contracts where they get all this money, they stick it all together in one big contract, so only a large contractor could bid on it. She made them take it apart, smaller contracts for smaller businesses, minority, women-owned small businesses, and she took the power from the commanders and said, no, we're going to do it right according to the law. And there was the extreme backlash against Bunny as a result of that, ending up with her removal and her objection to the Iraq contract, which was at the pinnacle of the opposition. And as a result of that, there was also another issue about issuing waivers to Halliburton so they didn't have to account for their costs either.
In fairness to the other side of that, let me just ask you, what have they claimed that your client did wrong? I know that there's the Government Accounting Office issued a report saying that the contract was properly awarded, and then there were these, as I mentioned earlier, and Bunny, that you responded to these notions of job performance. What is the case that they've made against Bunny?
The GAO never interviewed her, and none of her allegations were known when they did their investigation, so that's sort of irrelevant. The only thing they claim that Bunnatine Greenhouse did is she did her job too well.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't listen to her management when they said stop complaining and when you hear in the field what they want,
in other words,
you just
jump. You're interpreting the rules too strictly. Is that what they were saying to you?
Well, they may have thought that, but I always gave them the justification as to why we had to do things, and no one would ever contest those justifications.
Yeah, and I just want to say a couple of things. One is they clearly objected vigorously to her writing on the contracts. And the reason they did that, from my point of view, was to prevent the public from ever knowing of the contract disputes. If she did a separate memo, maybe they could have classified it. But by writing on the contracts, and she may not even have intended it, but the Army didn't like it, because when they produced the contracts, the public would learn of the objections. The second thing I want to say is, and which is a big problem for every whistleblower, anyone who has the courage to step forward and say there's been wrongdoing here will get a backlash. Their credibility will be attacked. Their performance will be attacked. Nobody sits back and says, oh yeah, I did something illegal. High five. It just is never going to happen. When a whistleblower steps forward, in every single case, there is a backlash. Now, sometimes it's just the immediate supervisor or the wrongdoer, and the system catches it. And the person keeps their job, and the corporation or the institution protects you. But as in Bunny's case and in many other cases, if who you're blowing the whistle on is high up on the food chain, is in a senior position, they're going to use those resources and clobber you. And that's why the Whistleblower Center exists. Whistleblowers need a more even playing field. A civil servant can't afford, the lawyers can't afford the costs of fighting the Pentagon or Halliburton. It's just, the differential is so radical. So that's why what's one of the main reasons the Whistleblower Center exists. We've established a defense fund for Bunny at whistleblowers with an S.org and try to even that playing field. So her voice can be heard and her career can be defended. If it isn't, it has a chilling effect. I believe every procurement officer in Washington, D.C., or around the country, be they with the Pentagon or in FEMA, at all the money that's going to be poured into New Orleans, or anywhere, they're looking at her case. Can a procurement officer follow the law to the T, stand up for what is right, and survive? If she gets knocked down, it will have such a chilling effect. It will cost the taxpayers, in my view, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in long-term rip-offs. Because unless the procurement officers have the backbone to do their job, the system will not work. That's why her case is not just the Iraq contracts, not just the courage of one individual, but when we looked at this case, it's the integrity of the contracting process. And mark my word, they're all watching. Management is watching, federal contractors are watching, and the procurement officers are watching. There is so much at stake in this case.
And procurement officers are writing in to Bunny. And I think the hallmark as to Bunny's case is she raised these allegations before the election, the last presidential election, concerning favoritism towards Halliburton, essentially. With everything that's happened, there has been no investigation of any of her allegations as we sit here to date. The Secretary of the Army promised an investigation. None has happened. It's been years. Why don't they want to do it in a simple investigation? If she was not telling the truth, or there was not so obvious, there would have been a full investigation, and she would have been shown to have had no meritorious claims. The fact that no one has the integrity in our current government to do an investigation speaks volumes. And I think some congressional committee owes the American people a hearing with Bunnatine Greenhouse so she can go over and explain exactly what happened, how this Iraq contracts were awarded, and let the American people judge for themselves whether it was proper.
Okay, let's go to your questions. Hi.
Hi, my name is Noura Jabed. I'm from Akron, Ohio, and I attend Tiffin University. My question for you today is, should whistleblowers be immune from prosecution if they were involved in the crime?
Just so you know, they're not. They never will be. If a whistleblower steps forward and the institution that they blew the whistle on can get some dirt on them, they're going to clobber them hard. Now, sometimes what's known as a snitch or an informant gets immunity to turn state's evidence. But that's really not whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is someone who is not part of the criminal network and cutting a deal. A whistleblower is someone who sees the wrongdoing and steps forward. But I just don't think it will ever happen in reality that a whistleblower will somehow get more immunity than anyone else.
Were you thinking in terms of if they're involved in the potential illegality that they're exposing?
Exactly.
That may get some kind of immunity deal? Is that?
Yeah, and again, that's more in the criminal process. It'll be up to a U.S. attorney, but that's really not whistleblowing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Hello, my name is Brianna Burke, and I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I attend Worcester State College. I'm curious, we often hear about the consequences whistleblowers face after they have, blown the top off an issue. And I was wondering, has there ever been a situation where maybe in the end, after things have settled, where a whistleblower has been praised for doing so?
Praised for doing so. I represented someone at the Federal Reserve who was responsible for Alan Greenspan's personal safety. He exposed the fact that it was he was totally vulnerable. They removed him from his position. We then did a major presentation. They realized everything he said was true. They would not give him his job back. They insisted that he leave, but they did give him a letter of recognition and personally praised him for actually probably doing the right thing. So that was one situation. Typically, a whistleblower who goes forward, career ends in the environment they are in and that career path. And if you're a lawyer, you'll never be you're never going to get into a big law firm or any other law firm again. If you're in procurement, you're not going to have any job related to procurement. And some can find some similar job paths. And the higher up you are in the management chain, the more difficult it is, because you're subject to greater background checks. And now with Google and things of that nature, you put someone's name in, if they have filed a lawsuit, it's going to pop right out. And it's much more difficult, essentially, for whistleblowers to protect their identity as being a whistleblower when they're trying to transfer over. So it's a hard road now for whistleblowers. It always has been. I can tell you I have one client who succeeded. He was being groomed to be the president of the largest utility in the United States, blew the whistle on nuclear power plant issues. He got removed. The Department of Labor wrote a decision saying the only reason they removed him was because he was a whistleblower. The only reason. He was ordered reinstated. It took 14 years to get that final reinstatement order approved by the courts. In the meantime, high-level executive was making minimum wage on hands and knees as a file clerk at another corporation, where some vice president keeps on seeing this guy in the hallway who's dressed, you know, like an executive, and say, "Who is this guy?" "Oh, he's a temp worker making minimum wage." And today he worked his way up and is now, I believe, a senior vice president of another corporation, of a Fortune 100 corporation. But that was his personal skills, and people saw him and worked with him, and they saw what he could do. He could never get an entry-level position in again, and no one would return his call. So that tells you that you're not going to really integrate very quickly. This is a guy who had every skill set you could imagine, had every friend in the universe, but when he was identified as a whistleblower, his career ended.
Bunny,
Yes.
no one can go into this type of endeavor without considering the consequences. And you have a family, so
Yes,
the
I do.
family's involved as well. Is the family supportive of what you're doing?
Of course, the family hates to see that I have to endure, you know, what I have to endure, and they were encouraging me to do otherwise, to just let it go or whatever. But remember, this is not just about Bunnatine Greenhouse. This is about the procurement process that Congress is responsible for, and that Congress has laid out the laws for. The kinds of things that I did and enforced were not laws that I made. You know, they were ones that we were supposed to adhere to. And so the only wrongdoing, and this is why I just can't run away, I can't quit, because I've done nothing wrong. I've done the things that are in the highest caliber of what it is that we are supposed to be doing, and doing those things for the right reason. So I have to stay here, you know, for that, because it's all about the contracting officer, their independence. It's all about the checks and balances that must be in the system. All of the poor performance that I may be accused of is the poor performance of not being controlled to do the wrong thing.
Are there members of Congress who have stepped forward to support you?
Yes, they are. They are. I've testified before Congress on 2 occasions, and they have done a press conference with me to say that as far as that federal law that says that there will be preferential treatment toward none, that they were there to back the actions that I have performed to try to make sure that the integrity of the process is preserved.
Now, this was a Democratic committee with no oversight authority, is that correct? So the
that's
majority
correct.
party has not chosen
Well, to me, I was not looking at anything of any partisan nature. I was simply looking
Right.
at the fact that this is Congress calling me to testify.
But I'm
about
just trying to
this-
make clear the authority
Yes,
issue,
right.
not the partisan issue.
Sure.
And I just want to stress that point. Whistleblowing should never be a partisan issue.
No.
And when the Democrats see a whistleblower they think may hurt the Republicans, or the Republicans see a whistleblower they think may hurt the Democrats, well, that all can happen. But ultimately, it's up to members of Congress with integrity to go beyond the party label and to say we're into good government, integrity and honesty, and supporting our federal employees who are doing what we, the Congress, told them to do. And that does happen. It has not happened yet with Bunny. I hope some Republicans step to the mantle. But in other whistleblower cases, it has, and there has been strong bipartisan support. That can often be the difference between winning or losing a case. If a sitting administration thinks they're going to get a pass because they were able to politicize a whistleblower, it's just going to be continuing retaliation.
I want to remind you that you're watching Close Up at the Newseum. Hi, I'm John Molesky of the Close Up Foundation. This week we're talking about whistleblowing and the First Amendment. Our guests are Michael and Stephen Kohn from the Whistleblower Center, the National Whistleblower Center. Also with us is Bunnatine Greenhouse, a former procurement officer for the Army Corps of Engineers who objected to bid contracts awarded to a Halliburton subsidiary. We are speaking with students from the Washington Center. They're here in Washington, D.C. from a variety of universities and colleges participating in internships. I want to let you know if you'd like more information on Close Up or the Freedom Forum and Newseum, you can visit our websites at closeup.org or newseum.org. And right now we're going to return to questions from our friends from the Washington Center. You are next, sir. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Chase Conrad. I'm from Pasadena, California, and I attend San Diego State University. Your situation is on a more national scale. It's large, but I'm sure that there are smaller organizations and businesses throughout the country that deal with the same situation, I would assume, fairly often. Why do you think that the whistleblower issues aren't better known to the public? Do you believe that maybe the media is scared of a political or corporate backlash? That's basically.
And others can take a shot at this. That's a very good question. I think the term whistleblower is still a new term. You know, almost every day we experience people who've never heard of it. Even people who contact the Whistleblower Center are first learning about it. It's an old concept of people standing up and exposing wrongdoing. Very old. But the word whistleblower is new, and I really appreciate this forum and others where we can try to get the word out. But you're 100% right. And what's fascinating is, do you know how many cases we've done where managers didn't even know they couldn't fire a whistleblower? You sit them down at deposition. Well, they went out to that government agency, and of course I fired them. I've even been before judges who've told me to my face, well, if I knew an employee went to the U.S. Attorney's office and blew the whistle, I'd fire him too. I mean, that's what's out there. Let's hope the culture can change.
What are the limits of First Amendment protections in this regard? And is there a difference between the public and private sector protections?
Yeah, the private and public sector has... one of the biggest problems with whistleblowing is there's no Whistleblower Protection Act. One law that protects all whistleblowers. You have about 40 federal laws, and every state has their own approach. And it makes it almost impossible to figure out who's protected or not. Unfortunately, federal employees are among the worst protected class of whistleblowers. Corporate America did not get whistleblower protection until Sarbanes-Oxley in 2002. Truck drivers got whistleblower protection in 1980. Airline pilots didn't get it until 2000. There's no whistleblower protection in the pharmaceutical industry. No surprise, you're seeing all those problems with the drug companies. No federal law protecting a drug whistleblower. No federal law protecting food safety. If someone sees contamination in food, blows the whistle, no federal protection. So it's a mess out there.
Bunny, and following up on the last question, how do you feel about your press coverage? Do you feel you've been treated fairly?
I think there's been interest, lots of interest in my story. And
have reporters gotten the story correct from your perspective?
Much, yes, very much so in any instance. But I don't want, we often talk about how bad the world is, but then we have to remember that the world is made of each of us. We can't let a term like whistleblower override the fact that when we take oaths of office, when we become public servants, that we have responsibility and accountability for the jobs that we are supposed to do. And that should not be sacrificed for anything, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the fact that people may not like you. Usually it's not going to be that they don't like me as a person, but they may not like the job that I have to do. And I'm not going to sacrifice that job. I have to first live with myself. I came to that job with values. And I have to look in the mirror every day to determine if any of those values are going to be compromised just to get along. And it's not about just getting along. If you give me an oath of office, if you give me at the senior executive level a job to do, my life depends upon it, and I'm going to give every fiber of my being to do that job. And I'm not going to stand with a term like whistleblower, a brand of that, and say that I am going to overlook my responsibility and accountability because of that. I have to take the brand.
Okay. Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Jamie Sander, and I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I go to school at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth. And I was just wondering that, as far as I know, whistleblowers used to be just protected under the First Amendment. And I was wondering if, now having the term whistleblower and being protected under the Whistleblower Act, if that can actually hurt them by taking away some of the First Amendment rights.
You think that it could work in the opposite direction?
Right.
Unfortunately for federal employees, it has. The law that Congress did for federal employees actually took away some First Amendment rights. However, it is our position at the Whistleblower Center is that the First Amendment trumps all laws, period. The rights that our founding fathers gave us after the American Revolution are intact. I don't care about judicial decisions. I don't care about adverse rulings. In our cases, we stare at that First Amendment and follow it, similar to what Bunny does when she says, this is the law, these are what I'm supposed to do. We demand adherence to the First Amendment as the bottom line.
Thanks. Hi.
Hi, my name's Andrea Labanco. I'm from Dyer, Indiana. I go to University of Illinois. And my question is this. From where does most of the opposition for whistleblowing in general, and more specifically the act and its pending amendment in Congress, come from? Do you see it more from the federal government or from the private sector?
It's pretty evenly divided. People in power do not like whistleblower protection. And so the problem is both parties come into power at various times, so neither one sees it in their ultimate interest. It's only when it comes on the American, on the radar of the voters that things are going to happen. And when you get some very principled members of Congress who push for legislation, and there are some out there, and they should really be applauded.
Who are they? Could you name names? Who are the leaders in this regard?
Senator Grassley is probably the biggest leader, and he's a Republican. So it's not, you've got to remove the labels. But when the legislation goes forward, I can tell you that the tendencies to gut it and weaken it are coming typically from the Republican side more often than not. And the private sector definitely objects to any legislation that's going to affect them. And so you end up with compromises, like in most of the federal whistleblower protection legislation, they give you a 30-day statute of limitations, which means you have to figure out that you've been discriminated against and you got to find a lawyer and figure out what's going on and file your case within 30 days, which means most people lose their cases before they even get started. And that was a compromise made to get the majority support of both houses. So I think what you have to look at is if members, constituents, call up their congressmen, congresswomen, and say, hey, this is an important issue. This is the root of American strength and power and freedom. Push it for me. If they start getting those calls, the laws will get passed. Because there is no member of Congress who really doesn't want to protect whistleblowers and wouldn't like to. And I can't tell you how many backroom meetings I've been in where they said, I wish I could, but X, Y, and Z, I can't. I'm sorry. They want to. They need help being able to do it. And you people who are sitting out here are the ammunition needed to get strong whistleblower protection.
The other side of the coin of your question of who is in opposition, who supports you? Where do you get your money?
Well, unfortunately, whistleblowing is not on the philanthropic radar screen or the public giving radar screen like other causes. It's just not up there. And if you look at annual giving for the whistleblower issue, for every single organization that might be supporting whistleblowers out there. It is such a tiny fraction of many of the other issues. It just has not been out there. Again, it's still a new issue.
What kind of operating budget do you have to cover, say, 10 cases out of 1,000 inquiries in a year?
The Whistleblower Center's operating budget is extremely small. It's in the lower hundreds of thousands. Tiny. The Whistleblower Center's main power is through the volunteer attorneys and staff that assist it, which is in the hundreds and hundreds and millions of dollars, where lawyers contribute their time on these cases or take referrals and work with them. The philanthropic community just is not there, and I hope it changes. But I want to say something about the opposition. I'll just give you a tragic example. I started actively being involved in whistleblowing in 1984. And at that time, the airline pilots and the airline stewardesses and workers were pushing for whistleblower protection in the airlines. Truck drivers had gotten it. If you drive a truck, you're protected if you blow the whistle. You're in an airplane, you're not. And for 16 years, they pushed for whistleblower protection and did not get it. And then one plane crashes, and they realized that maybe some of the mechanics and people had concerns. They didn't get whistleblower protection. And then a second plane crashes. And lo and behold, it's inserted in the law, and now we have airline employee whistleblower protection. That was the two-crash law. That's been the history. They've waited, for example, Enron and the collapse. How many investors lost how many billions and billions of dollars when Wall Street collapsed and everyone realized, my God, there's no protection. We had a Wall Street whistleblower 2 years before, and it broke my heart. This guy had complained about churning, ripping off investors, and who are these investors? You know, kids' education funds, pension funds, retirement funds, and he pointed it all out. And we couldn't get his case to step one. There was nothing out there. Enron collapses, billions of dollars lost, and now we have a good corporate whistleblower law. But that's a tragedy. It should not have to be that way.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Deamber Cole, and I attend Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana. And my question is, how long does a whistleblowing case, of course, like this one, generally last? And how does a person like Ms. Greenhouse go forward after the case?
But you may want to answer. She's from your state.
Oh, yeah, I'm from Louisiana. Yes, and, well, I expect that the right things are going to be done. It was unfortunate that my case was brought out. The Corps did the things that they had to do, and Mr. Kohn had to write a letter outlining all of the improprieties had gone on at the time of the election, you know, which put it on a different front, you know, than what it should have been. But the fact remains is that this is all about procurement. This is all about competition and effective competition. This is all about things being done for the right reason. It probably is going to go on too long than what I expect it to do, but I would love it to be that someone, even though this is not about this administration, this is about procurement and contracting, and that it be done in the best interest. I would expect that in the administration, someone would say, what Bunnatine Greenhouse is saying, regardless of the fact that it may be involving companies that may be said to be attached to anyone in the administration or whatever. No, we want to stop this train here, and we want to do the right thing, for the right reasons here.
You had like Bunnatine Greenhouse, who was the civilian equivalent of a brigadier general.
Yes.
She raises very serious concerns and then files, when no one does anything, she files a formal complaint. It was almost like 2 years before her whistleblowing became known, yes. Claiming that they were interfering with her job. A formal complaint filed under Title VII. The Army didn't even set it for an investigation for 2 years. They just let her sit there, and so they could churn and figure out how they're going to come up with bad performance evaluations in the meantime. So that's 2 years down the road already. It will take us probably to get the resources together another year or two to get into federal court. And then from there, With the appeal process, it could be a few more years. It's a long haul. And whistleblower, and I'll tell you that Bunnatine Greenhouse got the integrity and the courage of very few people I've ever come across in my experience of representing whistleblowers, which has been 20 years. She has, I've never seen someone so unflappable. And I know she's there for the long haul, and I just only wish there was someone in government would say, hey, there's something wrong here. Pick up the phone, give me a call, figure out how to fix a problem. Never happened. Probably will never happen.
You're describing a process that could easily take a decade.
That's right.
What is the next step, though? What happens? What is the very next step?
You exhaust your administrative remedies, and from there go into federal court or the Merit Systems Protection Board, or the two remedies that are offered next.
I just want to mention one thing about the timing. We have been able to resolve cases within a year or less. Often, if the wrongdoer is a little smart and realizes that a fix, as painful as it may be in the short term, has many long-term benefits.
You say a fix, you mean a settlement?
A fix, both a settlement and resolving the issues. Mm-hmm. In other words, looking at it, taking the bumps in the road, and moving on. Right. Some do that. Others don't. But just so you know, that case that Mike mentioned before that's gone on for 14 years, it's also, and one thing that we want to be able to do in the Whistleblower Center is if they want to drag it out, we'll drag it out. Don't think that your superior resources will mean we're going to put up a white flag. We want to be in a position to fight as long and as hard as they do when the headlines are over, when no one remembers who this person was. We want to be there to fight it out because the next time they'll know.
Well, I think that this is totally intolerable, to continue on, because remember, I do not make the laws for procurement. The commands don't make the laws. Congress makes those laws. What is it that the government wants? Do they want us to abide by the laws? Do they choose procurement executives and principal assistants responsible for contracting to make sure that effective competition goes on, that there is fairness, that there's a level playing field, that there is integrity of the process? Now, that is not anything to look at any values in Bunnatine Greenhouse. That is something to look at what were the values that were set in our nation as to the checks and balances that was going to go on in this process. I am just there. I took it seriously when I took my oath of office. And I meant to make sure that regardless, of the microscope that I was under, I was going to do the right things for the right reasons. And I was going to prepare a contracting and acquisition workforce that was second to none in government, where industry could not sit across and say those dumb government people. That's why the writing on the documents. That's why, because what we do in the documents we form is only by word processing. I tell them to give me a clean document back after they have seen what I have written specifically that they've got to change in order to avoid protests, in order to ensure the fairness of all of the people that are involved in our process. I have to look through all those lenses, and I make sure that my people grow to that point. And say, like one has told me now that this trouble has started, that we ask ourselves the question, what is it that Bunny would do when it comes to a crossroads of making the right decision? I want our leadership, I want our Congress to hear that. That is what our contracting people out there are looking for, is the strength of leadership. And it's all about leadership. And I believe leadership is about making a difference.
Hi, go ahead, please.
My name is Katie Stahl. I'm from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I attend Shippensburg University. And my question is slightly similar to the last question, but basically, Bunny, with your case, what exactly are you hoping to accomplish, whether it takes 14 years or a year? What exactly is it that you want to accomplish?
I'm glad you asked me that, because it's not about Bunnatine Greenhouse. It's all about, when I came to the Corps of Engineers in '97, I took all of my contracting officers to Dallas. And they stood up and they told me, I said, what is the culture? What is the health of this organization in contracting? Bunny, we feel like we are in the kitchen cleaning up after all the mess is made, but we are never invited to the table. That was wrenching to my heart, to get them the courage to be able to stand up, because contracting officers are the only ones to obligate the government. I had something like $23 billion responsible for throughout the Corps to make sure that was spent properly. Those people had to understand that they didn't need to be invited to the table. They needed to be at the table, since all of the work in the Corps of Engineers is not done organically, it's done by contract. And you've got to have strong people who have the fortitude not to have superficiality of teamwork, but to get in and lay the issues on the table early, so that at the very end of the day, we are going to have success in every acquisition that we release, and that also that we are not going to spend any more money. We're going to have the highest quality product, and it's going to be on time. And those war fighters that are in Afghanistan and in Iraq are going to be taken care of in the best sense that we can. That is what we wake up for every morning. That is what we feel like we add to that war zone out there that we are somewhat removed from, but we are out there on that battlefield too, making sure that those soldiers, when they look up, they are getting the type of service that they need in order to be able-bodied and for us to go out and engage and to win.
But I have a question for you.
Yes.
Of the chiefs of contracting that you have supported and put into their position since you've been there, can you tell me what's happened to the ones who followed your message the strongest?
Well, I tell you, they're gone. We have 2 chiefs of contracting now, one in Louisville District and one in Kansas City District, have been fired. You know, for reasons that are certainly were never brought to me as the procurement executive there, you know, to try to find out if there was any kind of relevance, you know, to those, but they were removed. And that's the chill that has been put over the whole contracting force, that if you don't get under the control and you don't do it the way that some people who are not even accountable to the process, then you're going to lose your job and you're gone.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Nicole McNeil, and I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I attend Xavier University of Louisiana. I've heard a lot about your courage, and I applaud you for your courage. Have you met people that might have said, okay, I might have had problems or with their institution or wherever they work, but they're afraid to step up, or because they know that there will be backlash and consequences, or have people come to you saying, you know, what do I do? How do I start?
Absolutely. That's what makes me continue and continue on each day, are the letters that I get from industry as well as from other government agencies saying thanks. Thanks for giving me the courage. I see things going on every day, and I've been fearing, you know, these backlashes. Every last one of us in our jobs, we have a purpose in our lives. Are we going to let fear override that purpose and not allow us, as we walk through this world, do what it is that we're supposed to do, and then walk out of this world and know that we've done it well? Fear cannot be what is, and that's what I stand as a symbol to them, that she is not fearful. She's going on and doing what she has to do for the right reasons, and that's the bottom line.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Hi, Bethany Williard from Herndon, Pennsylvania, and I attend Clark University. Bunny, how has your view of the government changed? Being such a strong civil servant, do you feel like you have more doubt in the government as a whole?
Well, I feel that the government is doing a little bit of failing me right now, you know, because it's not about Bunny's rules, you know, it's about their rules. And either you change the rules or you decide that there is going to be a standard or there is going to be a benchmark. And if I personify that standard, then let's not stand in the background and be fearful for whatever reason and not speak up for what is right, because it's more than Bunny that is in the balance. It's all of those folks out there that you're saying that a contracting officer are the only ones who have the responsibility and the obligation to obligate the government as far as the monies are concerned. Do you mean that, or do you not? Or can it be like General Griffin, who was my raider, who was not in the contracting process at all, not in the lineage of authority, but he can tell me, don't write on contracts, don't do this and don't do that. And then he cannot be accountable. He can't go to jail for this. You know, but still, I'm going to have to try to advise him, educate him, and let him know. But he then has the pen, on the other hand, to say, well, if you don't do what I say do, you know, then I can give you performance. And every time I would ask him, why are you doing this to me? I'm just following a process. And the process was give an SES 2 performance ratings that are below successful, and you can do what you want to do. So he uses the phrase now, I got it done. And everybody around the court, let's get it done, get it done. And they're getting it done with those contracting officers out there who are not abiding and whatever. And that should not be anything to stop you from doing the right thing for the right reason.
Time for one more quick question. Hi.
Hi, my name's Rudy Berry. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I go to St. Bonaventure University. You talked about the damage that could be done in one's career with the whistleblower label put on you. What reparations are you two gentlemen specifically looking for in this case for her to move on with her career successfully?
Well, Bunny there's limited options for whistleblowers. She should be able to get her job back, and that's what and her cost of litigation, and that's essentially what the law offers. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly very modest. It's not, whistleblowing law is not a law where you make money. You sue someone, you make a big fortune. It's just returning you back to where you should be.
But I want to say just one exception to that, and everyone here or out in the audience should know, is there's one really good whistleblower law out there. It was written by Abe Lincoln and passed by his Congress during the Civil War when they saw procurement fraud that was killing Union soldiers during that war. And it's called the False Claims Act. And Senator Charles Grassley, mentioned before from Iowa, strengthened that law in 1986. And it's the only whistleblower law that rewards whistleblowers. It gives you the right, when you're ripping off the federal government and you work for a contractor and you see the government getting ripped off, to get a percentage of what the government is saved. And since that law was strengthened, the United States has saved billions of dollars and collected billions of dollars from fraudulent contractors. And if you want more information, as I say, whistleblowers.org, and we're actively engaged in that law also.
That'll unfortunately have to be the final word. Terrific discussion. Thank you for your questions and comments. Thanks to the Washington Center, another fine crop of students with great questions and comments. Again, for also additional information, this book is available, Whistleblower Law, co-authored with a third party by our two guests, Stephen and Michael Kohn of the National Whistleblower Center. And also especially want to thank Bunnatine Greenhouse for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you being here and sharing your tale with us. Next week, another First Amendment issue. We're going to take a look at the question of flag burning and the current law and the current efforts to either support that as free speech or stop it through law. So we hope you'll join us then. Until then, for all of us at the Close-Up Foundation, the Freedom Forum and Museum, I'm John Molesky. Thanks for watching.